Have you ever had a conversation with someone in a foreign language? Or have you maybe scheduled a meeting with an individual from a different country, continent, or company over an email? Have you had a chat with someone from a different religious background? If so, you found yourself in an intercultural communication situation, as this was an interaction between persons with different cultural backgrounds. The question is then, does it matter? And if so, how to communicate better with other people from other cultural groups in a modern globalized world? Welcome. My name is Agnieszka Góra from Jagiellonian University, and this is one of the lecture videos within the DISCOM project. This video is about intercultural communication competence, which is simply the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in various cultural contexts. But before we dive into the topic, let me start with a twist on the famous saying, people see what they want to see. And it's equally true that what you see is not what others see. Well, let's test it. When asked, what do you see in this picture? Some of you would probably say, oh, they're having a nice meeting. While others would conclude, they're eating some really good food. Oh, it's a cultural thing, one would respond. Why is that so? Based on our cultures, we put different emphasis and assign different meanings and intentions to similar facts and behaviors. Culture is a system of ideas and behaviors that is accepted and familiar to a particular group of people. Cultures vary across geographic regions, they come across borders, age groups, societies, companies, and even smaller groups. It is our default mode to see reality and other people through our own cultural lens. How so? Our brains see accepted and familiar as good, comfortable, and easy. So we need to understand that a person's behaviors and reactions are often culture-driven. While they may be different than yours, they are still normal and appropriate. How to communicate with an eye to cultural aspects. How to effectively deal with people with different codes and cultures. Obviously, you cannot learn every tip and trick and be proficient in every culture in the world. But you can be, though, respectful and conscious about some of the following aspects. Cultures can be classified into many various categories. Today, I will focus on one particular category and indicate 6 elements to consider in an intercultural communication scenario. For that purpose, we will use the framework of low and high context cultures. In a low context culture, we assume that we have a low level of shared information. We don't have the same values, we do not share the same background. With simply saying, we do not have the same frame of reference. That is why request for information is much more direct. There are plenty of clear descriptions, unambiguous, explicit messages. Low context communicators tell how it is and give it all straight. There's not a lot of reading between the lines or hidden meaning attached to a simple sentence. Effective communication in a low context culture is simple and explicit. So when I want you to understand a policy, I will simply and clearly just take the policy document and say we need to stay in line with that policy. It's also common to repeat multiple times during the meeting what was said or agreed during a conversation. Also, it's best to recap a meeting in a written memo afterwards. Low context culture rely more on spoken, written word than on trust. What you want the other person to know is explicit, verbalized, and emphasized. On the other hand, in a high context culture, we assume that we have the same reference points, we have the same body of knowledge, and we know literally the same information. Therefore, meaning is implicit, and the message is found in the context rather than in the words. There are more nuances to each statement, more layered meaning in a simple conversation. Because in a high context culture, people share common values and assumptions, it is just not necessary to say everything explicitly. There are fewer verbal messages and they are more indirect. In a high context cultures, nonverbal cues play a huge role and communicate what is not being said literally. In a high context communication, one simply needs all senses to listen. There's a Japanese expression that became popular some years ago, KY, kukiga yomenai, which literally translated means a person who cannot read the air. Because it's important to read the atmosphere, to notice what is in the environment and what is going on in the room, to understand the whole communication. Why the distinction between high and low communication culture matters? Because it influences not only in what words and in how many sentences we convey a message, but also how we communicate and how we perceive the other person we communicate with. How much people rely on context influences perceptions of elements such as time. Is it okay to be 10 minutes late for a meeting or it's a capital offense? Personal space. Are you feeling that somebody is in your face? You can't shake the feeling that somebody is trying to keep distance from you. Get away. It influences gestures, eye contact, and body language. For example, oh, is there a fly in the room? Or it was a gesture that's important in meaning. On the other hand, are these people robots or human beings? Titles, greetings, and courteous manners. Have we met before? Meaning, why are they addressing me on a first name basis? Or on the other hand, they are well-known professionals. How to greet them properly? The use of silence. Are we done with the meeting? Or it's just a pause to gather thoughts? Relationship and trust building. Why are we rushing towards signing the deal? We've just started the dinner. Or, well, we have an agenda, so let's get down to business and close our talks. Remember, it's also never just one way or the other. There are no two separate boxes, rather a scale of high and low context cultures. It's a continuum. I'm based in Poland, and when I asked 5 of my friends from USA, India, Greece, Egypt, and Malaysia to describe my personal communication style and my culture, I was pretty surprised because I heard 5 completely different stories to the extent that by just reading them, you would never believe that it's all perception of about the same person. Why? They conditioned their description in comparison to their own cultures. So this shows that whether we perceive someone to represent high or low context culture is subjective in nature and relative. An individual perception in communication in that regard is everything. To become better at intercultural communication, one will say, do your homework, learn about the other culture. I take a slightly different approach. I encourage you to take a look at yourself and try to determine whether you and the person that you communicate with, where are you on this scale? In some conversations, it will be you who uses more reference and context than the other side. Then, don't forget to give this background information to the person to make sure there are no misunderstandings between you. In other situations, it will be the other person who counts on you to read the room. Then, it's necessary to simply ask an extra question about the background and frame of reference. At the end of the day, people tend to deem their culture to be less complicated, obvious, and we forget to communicate culturally conditioned cues. Once again, you cannot learn about every culture, but you can ask anybody any question, provided that you do it with respectful curiosity. I like to say that you have to be curious to understand others. Intercultural communication competency is not about changing your culture. It's about expanding your culture to merge all the positive aspects you encounter into one global mindset. To conclude, I will quote Erin Meyer, who once said that intercultural communication competency is like a muscle. It takes exercise to be flexible, and it sure can be exhausting. But remember, practice makes perfect. Thank you.